Welcome back to the 5-5 Sports Podcast. I'm Evan Rootenberg. Here as always with me is Evan Rootenberg and Matthew Choi. This week we also have Darya Amirshahi joining us once again. Another NFL season has come to an end with the Super Bowl going to Tampa Bay after their win against the Kansas City Chiefs. What stood out to you from the game?
It was a strange game. It was unexpected because if any team was going to get a blowout, I think obviously the general consensus throughout the NFL was if there was to be a blowout, it would be from the Chiefs. But the outside of Tom Brady, because we know, he did his job. He showed up. He made the right plays. Him and Gronk, they got their 2 touchdowns. Antonio Brown out of nowhere. Why not have Antonio Brown on Tampa Bay just score a touchdown in the Super Bowl? What is a better way to conclude this NFL season? But what stood out for Tampa Bay was their defense. Their defense was phenomenal the entire game. Levante David, I think, deserves a lot of credit being the captain and the anchor of that defense. I don't think a lot of people are talking about the young guns over there, like Devin White and Winfield, they all had a terrific game because in order to stop Patrick Mahomes, you need 11 guys playing at their best level in order to, if you want to hold them to under 10 points, that's what you got to do. So a lot of those guys deserve credit. But what let Kansas City down, obviously, I think was the offensive line. When you look at the amount of pressures both QBs had, Patrick Mahomes had 29 pressures, and he ran about 500 yards more than any other QB in the NFL this season, regular and postseason. So that's kind of a stat that obviously stands out. The O-line wasn't good enough. There were, I think, 1 or 2 injuries. There's at least 1 injury. I'm not sure if there's a second one to the starters on that O-line, but it was clear that Patrick Mahomes had no time. He did his all. The one thing I will not tolerate from either of you today is Patrick Mahomes slander, because that game is not on Patrick Mahomes. It is all credit to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and the complete team that they had, because we all looked at Kansas City as the team to beat last year, and they were the favorite by a wide margin, and they got to where they were supposed to be. But the Buccaneers really showed up, and a lot of the young guys on defense proved their worth, and a lot of the senior guys on there as well kind of proved how valuable they have been over the last, 4 or 5 years to that organization, and kind of keeping them a competitive team with, Jameis Winston and his erratic behavior at the quarterback position.
Yeah, Joyce on Tampa Bay. It's a game that really both offense and defense kind of just played everything right. I want to talk more about how Kansas City did, and you're right about this game should not be seen on Mahomes. It was clearly that the offensive line was injured to begin with, so clearly he wasn't able to have as much time in the pocket as he normally would. And I don't know, looking at the way he was playing instead, it kind of looked more like Lamar Jackson than Patrick Mahomes to me, the way I was seeing it. And that was because he just didn't have enough time to play like he normally does.
He was almost forced. That stat where he had I think the exact number was 497 yards before throwing the ball. Clearly it's not that Patrick Mahomes wanted to be running around. He was forced to, and if you watch the game, you would understand that he was forced to, he was put in that position by the offensive line.
Yeah. And I think the play calling for Kansas City wasn't great. Danny Reed didn't do a good job as coach, and I assume it would be because he probably had other things on his mind that wasn't about football. Because we know that the accident his son was in the car accident literally the night before Super Bowl. So I just think everything for the Chiefs kind of went wrong this game. And we talked about how, or as I mentioned in previous weeks, that Kansas City isn't an offense that you can just stop. It's an offense that you have to outscore. But this week, Tampa Bay found a way to stop Kansas City's offense. And I don't know, both of us, we've both been kind of harsh on the Buccaneers all season. We've constantly said that we're not convinced yet of this team. Well, we're convinced now.
Yeah.
Well, I got to be honest. I'm just wondering what Bill Belichick was thinking while watching that game at home, seeing Gronk score those 2 touchdowns, Antonio Brown. And as a Patriot fan, every time I saw it was like a dagger to the heart. Honestly, it was kind of a strange one. But we can't go without saying how awesome Tom Brady was in this game. Obviously, the defense was a highlight in this game, especially from Tampa. But Tom Brady is undeniably the GOAT. It's incredible to see what a performance he put out, and what he continues to do at his age, and the fact that he's thinking that he's gonna keep going after this year. I heard we'll have to see on that, but it's incredible. The amount of rings he has and legacy that he's providing. But talking more on the game now, in terms of the performance, I thought that Tampa just were the better team. It is like you can see by the scoreline, it wasn't close. And they knew how to take control, and that's because of the players they have. And you know what? Let's be honest here. As Troy kind of mentioned, we were all kind of on this boat of, I don't know if we really believe in this Tampa Bay team because they had been blown out before in the regular season, and they weren't exactly convincing. Whereas Kansas City were on a little bit of an opposite end. But you know, you have a player like Tom Brady on your team, and it's just it is a different level. And it's, I think Kansas City they'll take it hard, of course. Mahomes particularly, it wasn't his best game. He couldn't do so much. There was a lot of small factors that influenced how this game went. But you have to say that, like, this is something that he'll have to learn, as he is very young. And that Kansas City will be a top contender again next season. But you have to give full credit to Tampa Bay, even though it was a hard one to watch. You got to give full credit.
Yeah, we'll talk about a little bit about Tom Brady and Bill Belichick later, and if it affects either one. I mean, it's hard. I'm not going to discredit Bill, but you can't discredit Bill Belichick because Bill Belichick, I think, has taught Tom Brady almost all that he's learned. I think when we talk about the GOAT situation, you know, whether Patrick Mahomes can have like this terrific career and, you know, match Tom Brady, if he gets 6-7 wings, I think we'll end up having this discussion where Patrick Mahomes is the greatest purely off arm talent. What Tom Brady has is just, he's just such a good game manager, and he knows how to win. And when he talks to the rest of the locker room, listens, he has that respect, and he's earned that respect, you know, going through everything he has over the last 20 plus years. So it's not that, like, I think Tom Brady has always been in a good situation. He's never really had to face a lot of adversity because he always has had talent around him. But the way he kind of manages himself, the way he composes himself, that is impressive. And to win 7 rings is so the reason that he is the GOAT is because he simply wins, and that's what you are judged on. And do I think he's the most talented quarterback we've ever seen? Absolutely not. I think when you look at Aaron Rodgers and when you look at, you know, just pure, you know, playmaking ability, there's definitely, you know, aspects that Tom Brady doesn't have in his game that other QBs have. But what Tom Brady does is win. And now winning without Belichick at the age of 43, that's where I have to give all my credit to, because it's just not easy to do. I didn't believe it would happen until I actually saw it happen. I firmly believe that Patrick Mahomes, the talent that they had on that roster, it was going to get them through. But that's where Tom Brady deserves credit. It's not that he was the reason they won the Super Bowl, because without that defense stepping up the way they did, you know, we may have a much different game. If it comes down to the last drive and you put in Patrick Mahomes' hands, who knows what happens? But they didn't let it come to that. And, you know, it's kind of sad because we all wanted to see, I think, a dramatic conclusion. So I think NFL fans were a little bit deprived from that, and it didn't come down to the fourth quarter. It's basically over once Leonard Fournette got that rushing touchdown. But the overlying conclusion of this game is Tom Brady deserves all the credit that's coming his way for the outstanding career that he has had. And it's not over yet, according to Tom. So we'll see where his future lies.
Yeah, and it's going to tell Tom Brady. Like, I mean, the whole narrative for his entire career at this point was that he had Belichick as coach. Now, like, I mean, Evan, you love to say that he was a system QB, but I think he's proven himself. There's nothing left Brady has to prove in his career. There's nothing left he should have had to prove because he already won 6 Super Bowls. But I think this was kind of like the nail in the coffin, saying I am the greatest. I had the greatest career as a quarterback, and like he kind of solidified that status.
Yeah. I think maybe before we move on to the next segment, I think 2 guys that deserve a shout out in Tampa Bay. One, Shaq Barrett. He was all over Patrick Mahomes throughout the entire game. It was a total mismatch. Him and Pierre Paul was getting in there. Vita Vea also, you know, had his impact on the entire D line. But Shaq Barrett especially. I mean, we've been talking about the defense. Todd Bowles, he should be an NFL head coach. And Stephen A. always talks about, you know, more African American coaches in the NFL. He was trying to play the racism card on you know, Steve Nash, you know, saying Steve Nash has only got the job because he was talking about a guy that deserves a head coaching job, you just have to look at Todd Bowles. He has had a phenomenal year with that defense. And him and Erica Bieniemy on the Chiefs offensive coordinator, both of them deserve head coach positions next year. Will either of them get it? That's to be determined. But I think what could happen is Bruce Arians may retire. He's 68 now. He may, call it a career. Todd Bowles moves into the head coaching position at Tampa Bay. If that will happen, we'll see. There's a lot to be determined in this NFL offseason. We know the drama going on with the QBs. We're now waiting on Watson and Carson Wentz, who will likely be traded this week. So the NFL offseason is just getting started. It's been a fun NFL season, but the offseason may just be a wild ride.
Okay, so moving off of the NFL for the last time until September, moving on to basketball. As always, I will ask, what were your thoughts of the Raptors in the past week?
I was impressed by Raptors, and funny thing, because we recorded last week's podcast before, literally the day of Van Vliet's 54-point game, and I just think after that game, the Raptors, except for maybe one game against the Hawks, I believe, I think we've for the most part looked pretty good. I think everyone has been kind of stepping up more, and now we were at the bottom of the league earlier this season. Now we're a fringe playoff team, and I think yesterday's game was probably we saw them kind of come back even after Nick Nurse got ejected. We lost Kyle Lowry, and our players still showed up. So I'm definitely more positive about the Raptors than I was earlier this season. Do I think we're contenders? No, but we are a playoff team, and we say this every week. The Raptors will always come hard. We never have to question just the energy they bring to every game, and they've been showing that this past week.
Yeah, usually on the show when I go first, you tell me that I basically summarized it perfectly. I think you just absolutely nailed that. I think we know what the Raptors are. We know they're not contenders, and if they are a 6, 7, 8 seed, then if they play a Philly, if they play a Milwaukee, if they play a Brooklyn Nets, it's not going to be close just because NBA, it's not like hockey where it's determined on talent and kind of you get these big upsets in the Stanley Cup playoffs where, we talk about, Tampa Bay getting swept by Columbus. We talk about Montreal being Pittsburgh. Hockey's a lot more unpredictable when it comes to the playoffs. And with the Raptors, we know what they'll bring you. I think some of the guys that have been forced into rotation role, especially with OG being out and having to fill out the three, but a guy like Watanabe. I think when he's on, he's dynamic as they come. If he's open for three, he can hit a corner three. His defense has been phenomenal. Just a long, lanky guy who comes in, does his role on defense. I'd say the one thing: sometimes the Raptors on defense just look lost, and then other quarters they'll just pull together. So the Raptors are really a 4-quarter team. You just don't know where you're gonna get, from minute to minute, which it's almost like an intriguing factor when watching the Raptors, but at times it almost makes them unwatchable. Against Memphis last night, they were struggling in the first half. That was a struggle to watch defensively because they just let Memphis do what they wanted at will. But they pulled together the second half, ended up winning comfortably, and that's sometimes is how basketball works. Freddie with that 54-point performance, most points ever from an undrafted player. So that in itself deserves all the credit. We know Freddie's a baller, and the way he works, the way he kind of goes about his business, he's a very respectable player. So it was very good to see Freddie do that. But watching the Raptors, it's a week-to-week thing. You don't know what you're going to get. We know what they are as a whole, but from week to week, you really don't know what to expect, and that's kind of the intriguing factor of the Toronto Raptors in 2021.
Yeah, you both kind of said all, to be honest. I think consistency is a key. I'm glad it's great to see the Raptors doing a little bit better than how they started the season. They're 11-13 now, and they are going to be at least in contention for a playoff spot with a 6, 7, 8 seed right now. But in terms of performance, you're right. That's consistency is the thing they need to figure out, especially and defensively, specifically. So it's good to see. We gotta wait and kind of see how this team goes. Right, I believe Lowry got injured yesterday, so we don't know what the situation is there. But with Van Vliet playing the way he is, it's very good to see. But honestly, I honestly we just gotta go game by game, see where it kind of heads, and how the Eastern Conference is at this season. We don't know where they can finish, but I guess most likely is the 6th, 7th, 8th seed is the most likely. But yeah, I guess we have to see how it goes.
Quickly, just on that point, we have to recognize that the East is still significantly weaker than the West. The top half of the East has gotten gradually stronger over the last 3 or 4 years, but the West is still 9 teams deep, which is what always separates the West from the East. So the Raptors, if they were in the West, would definitely all be a playoff team, but they kind of have the luxury of you have the Knicks and you have Atlanta, who are good young teams, but don't have that kind of killer instinct yet. They haven't, been playing long enough in order to have that kind of threat in the playoffs. Charlotte would go in that category too. So there's a few, teams that the East is getting better, but the Raptors have that experience and they still have that veteran leadership that could push them into, those final spots. So we'll see. It's not a guarantee that the Raptors are a playoff team. I think Raptors fans have to remember that they still have a long way to go, and at times it's still pretty ugly basketball at times, but if they can get it together and just play as a team, because as individuals, we know some of those guys are very limited. But if they can play as a team consistently, then you don't know in this league. But we know what their ceiling is, and that's probably a 6 seed.
I mean, all the teams in the East right now, like the bottom half playoff teams, they're all teams that are pieces away from being like true contenders, and they're just kind of just not quite there yet. So Raptors is like one of the few teams that are falling away from being a contending team slowly. So we'll see like how they'll kind of meet in the middle there.
What has stood out for the rest of the league?
I think for me, I'm kind of do what I did last week and kind of signify like a team that stood out. I think the Sacramento Kings have stood out this past week, especially they're on like a 4-game win streak. And I think, of course, when you mentioned the Sacramento Kings, the person that stands out the most is De'Aaron Fox, who is slowly emerging as.
I feel like you're going to go with Tyrese Halliburton on that one if you're talking about, Kings players that are, making a name for themselves.
There are several players
we know about De'Aaron Fox. But Tyrese Halliburton, the way he's kind of stepped up, I think he's kind of – what's the word? He's brought excitement to the Kings because we knew what De'Aaron Fox was, but all of a sudden you added another piece, and the combination of everything, going for Sacramento is really making this team exciting to watch as a whole.
And the thing that impresses me most is they're not far outside the playoffs. They're right under. They're the same record as Golden State, and like I don't know. I wouldn't like count them out of the playoffs this season. And it's kind of weird to say because most of the years, like as I've watched basketball, Sacramento was usually like at the bottom of the West. I know like early 2000s they were like that contending team, but for like, the majority of like the late 2000s, early 2010s, they have probably been like the bottom team there. And then now we're finally seeing them kind of step back into the position of being able to be in the playoffs. Not truly contenders yet, but they are now in the conversation. Like I wouldn't count Golden State over them too much, near what I count Portland. So it's kind of interesting to see if whether or not this team is finally kind of in that area yet.
Yeah, I like this. I like the Sacramento Kings. They've been phenomenal. They've had a great start to the year, and that they're going to bring effort no matter who the opponent is, no matter what game they're playing. When you have a young talented team, they clearly have something to prove. And when watching Sacramento Kings, you could clearly see that in their game. I have to go with the player, and I have to go with a player that's an elite guy that's having a career year. He had a career week, and that's Nikola Jokic. What a phenomenal player! Just watching him, he doesn't look like he has the movement to be a great NBA player because he's almost playing the game in slow motion. But he's so effective. 50 points. I think he had 240. Yeah, he had another 40+ game. I don't know what he finished with on that night, but Nikola Jokic. When you look at a star player having basically a career week, Nikola Jokic, that's what stood out this week. Phenomenal. And that's where I'll leave my praise for Nikola Jokic. What a terrific week for the big man from Serbia.
Yeah, I wouldn't count. We kind of mentioned just like early in the year, like if he had the potential to be, but I wouldn't count him out in MVP voting for this season.
Yeah, I feel like Embiid's a front runner, but Jokic, you never know. There's still a lot of basketball to be played. There's still a lot of votes to be changed. So, it could be a year of the big men. But those, both we know what Joel Embiid's doing. We know Philadelphia's number one. But yeah, just from a career night standpoint, Nikola Jokic in his 50 the other day was just phenomenal basketball. He's
Completely agree.
clearly at the top of his game.
Yeah.
Now we are moving on to the NHL with another week of the Leafs. What has your thoughts been on the team?
They're playing phenomenal hockey. I mean, Vancouver is a pretty bad team, but at least the Maple Leafs made them look like a bad team. Justin Hall deserves a lot of credit for being basically the best defenseman in hockey. Yeah, you saw when Connor McDavid was playing against his line, he would just avoid Justin Hall. He was going to Mikko Lennon. And that's high praise when the best player in hockey feels like they can't get around you. So Justin Hall deserves a lot of credit for basically becoming one of the NHL's elite defensemen. But the other guys, I'm impressed with TJ Brody and Zach Bogosian. I think they play solid hockey throughout. Morgan Riley, we all love Morgan Riley. You know, he's basically a captain. He's a leader. He's been around for a while, so he knows what he's doing, and he's basically playing. Probably last year was his best hockey, but he's still playing a high level of hockey that, you know, will win you games. The Leafs have the right formula, and they look like the best team in Canada, basically in the Canadian Conference. Montreal, you feel like they don't have that firepower. They don't have that sustainable, you know, scoring threat that will be able to kind of compete with the Leafs throughout the season. We know that the Leafs do have in past weaknesses, but this team looks pretty flawless. And when you look at the third game, the final game against Vancouver last night, when they looked horrible for 2 periods, and they were in control with 5 minutes left, up 3-1. So the Leafs are building something really, I wouldn't say special, but they're building something very encouraging, because I have not had a feeling about a Leafs team in my life that I believe that this team, you know what, if they play like this, they could beat anybody. And I've always had that doubt because of their defense, whether it's goalie, whether it's stars not producing. This team's firing on all cylinders, so long may it continue.
I don't blame you for being hopeful, because they don't just. I don't think they just look like the best team in the North Division, but I think they are currently the best team in the league right now, the way they've been playing. And I think the biggest standout is that they're just playing a lot more. Like we always praise Raptors that even when that they're not winning games, you never question their heart or their energy. That was something that was in question with the Leafs last season, but I think they kind of got past that this year. I think you see a lot of energy they bring each game, and I think honestly last night was probably the worst game we've seen of the Leafs. Like
They still won 3-1.
Yeah, and they still won.
They still won.
That's a testament of how
And they
well we've been kind
still
of
beat
playing
the Canucks. Yeah.
all year. And yeah, I think like you said, the defense has been such a standout. Like our defense has been like, it's been painful to watch for the last 2 seasons, to say the least. Like I think we're just riding on Morgan Riley for a good chunk of like the last better part of the decade, and then we kind of left everyone else like to dry. But I think I said this last week, but I'll say it again. We are finally kind of getting that team that Dubas really wanted to put together, and we all knew that Dubas wanted Keefe as well to coach this team. He never really wanted Babcock to be the coach of it, and we're kind of seeing his vision of the Toronto Maple Leafs come together. People doubt to see if his vision will work, because he's not a traditional hockey guy.
I'd agree. I was also doubting it. Yeah.
But I think we're kind of seeing that maybe people were judging on his ability to be the manager of the team a little too quickly.
Yeah, sometimes you just need time in sports, and I'd say, I mean, we've seen many examples over history, but I'd say one example that Toronto sports fans could really relate to, especially now with the Blue Jays kind of signing George Springer and really putting together a contending team. We saw Ross Atkinson, Shapiro, whatever the nickname is, going through the Toronto media circle for those two. I think we saw that in Cleveland, where they were struggling for a while. People didn't like them, but they knew how to find young talent. They got Lindor, and a bunch of other guys on like 4 or 5 years ago when they were in when they lost to the Cubs in the finals. We saw kind of what the end product of Mark Atkins or Ross Atkins and Mark Shapiro, we kind of saw what their end product was and what they can do. And I think Blue Jays fans are starting to see that come together with this team. So I think when you're looking at, I think it's a very, relatable example when you look at kind of the way they've developed this team. They've had the talent for a long time. Now we're really starting to see them become an all-around great team, which is something that it was hard to predict coming from this Leafs side, especially because we know the history of how they play on the defensive side of the puck. But again, you're right. They may be the best team in hockey right now, and there's just no way to criticize this team because they're playing flawless hockey.
Yeah.
Next, we move on to soccer and the Premier League. Have fun. Go for it.
Darya, I want to start. I want to go through the big six teams. I think let's start with the team that will take the least to go through. Let's talk about Spurs quickly. A bad loss to Chelsea, where that was kind of a deciding factor in their season if they were going to be contenders for the Champions League spots. I think clearly they're not. I think what does this mean for Jose Mourinho specifically? Because a lot of the blame, and I think rightfully so, has fallen on Mourinho's shoulders.
You know, there's always this thing with the 3-year syndrome that he has. I think it's happening too. It's kind of sad. I'm sorry. I said it when he was at United. I think even at his later years at Chelsea, this guy isn't the same as he used to be. The game has changed, and the tactics he has put on his side is not good enough anymore. He is dependable on players such as Son and Kane, which are both fantastic players in the Premier League. But it's simple as you cannot base a Premier League team on just that. I remember I was sitting here saying Spurs may have a chance to win the league this season back in like maybe November, right? It was early days.
Yeah, it was like Chelsea, Liverpool, Spurs at the top. And
now I feel embarrassed to say that because now they're what? I think they're 7th or 8th, or they're at least.
It could be 7th. 6th
well,
or 7th. Spurs.
They're in the top 4 hunt right now. They're not by any means in the Premier League race. I think Mourinho has to really look at himself in the mirror and understand that this cannot keep working like this. Tottenham fans, I would assume that this is not what you want to be. You're kind of in the same situation you were with Poch and with other coaches. And in my opinion, actually probably worse than where you were off with Poch in a way. It's simple as this team seems to bottle it in the worst of times. And we have to give credit to Chelsea. They played a good game against Tuchel men. Did a really good job in that game.
They're 8th. Spurs are 8th.
Oh, there you go. But the fact of the matter is, Mourinho's at a point right now in his career where he has to decide to himself: is he going to change? Is he going to change his style of play so he can adapt to this game, or not? Simple as though he hasn't been doing that, and that's why Spurs are not doing well.
Yeah, Mourinho in his prime, with whether it's Chelsea, Porto, Inter Milan, he would always have the players go for war to him, and he had that kind of mentality. But that mentality just doesn't exist in football. It's all about the technical players, creating space. That's kind of where football's gone. So you look at Spurs, and some early on when they're winning and they're winning defensively, it looked like Mourinho doesn't change. This isn't for anybody. So credit to Mourinho, but you can't really credit him because they're not good anymore. If he wins the Carabao Cup, good for them because Spurs haven't won anything in forever. So if he manages to win something for them, I don't like Spurs, but I do like Harry Kane and Son. I think Harry Kane at the very least deserves something for staying with Tottenham for 7 years. But yeah, that's where we'll go with Spurs. Let's move on to another Big Six team. Let's go with Liverpool, who have had their struggles. Outside Darya, what is the reason for this? What would you pinpoint it to? And I think we can avoid injuries because we know injuries have played a factor. I'd say outside of injuries, especially Virgil van Dijk, what can we pinpoint as being the problem for Liverpool?
To be honest, I think there's small problems within the squad, and it's just I think it comes down to the fact that Salah and Mane are not firing on all cylinders right now, which is something Klopp had he had last season. And of course, you can say, look, the excuse of injuries, you can't say it all the time. You have Jordan Henderson right now and Fabinho in your defense, but you got Kabak recently in the January transfer window, and you got some other players, Ben Davis as well. So they're gonna have replacements. The thing is, though, their style of play, even against City the other day, they were not great per se. They didn't look prolific. They didn't look exciting as much as City was, and it didn't look like they wanted to win that game as much as City did. So in general, I think Liverpool is in a really tough spot. I hate saying this because I'm a United fan, but this is a rough patch, and to me, I don't think they're title challengers this season. However, they're going to come back. And it's just a rough patch for them that Klopp needs to understand that the way everything worked last season was there's a lot of luck that went into his title campaign. I don't think he really understands that because he had a very fit squad. He had prolific players in Mane and Salah and Firmino even. To me, there's a lot of small factors that kind of are it's amalgamation all together, right? And it's kind of really putting stress and pressure onto the team itself.
I'd say I'll give a criticism to Klopp and then I guess some area of praise. With Klopp, he's become very arrogant in the media, and it's a horrible look for him. I mean, he has to understand that this is kind of what he's saying is coming off. It's coming off as very salty, and I think he's just so used to winning almost that it's almost like he's surprised. But the excuses need to stop from Jurgen Klopp. The fact is, injuries happen, and you usually don't lose the best defender in the world for a year. Like, obviously that's going to hurt, but the problem hasn't been in defense. Jordan Henderson, Fabinho, whoever goes in for whatever the combination is, because they've had about 1,000 at the back, but you have to. Their problem is they're not creating enough up front, and Sadio Mane and Mohamed Salah played a lot of football over the last 3 years, and they still. We've seen Salah. We saw him in the 3-1 win over West Ham. He came up with 2 moments of brilliance. That counterattack goal was phenomenal. So Liverpool have skill, and they have qualities throughout the pitch, but the problem is they don't have any connection from the midfield to the attack. When you look at guys like Shaqiri having to kind of fill those roles, it's just. You have guys that maybe don't fit in a specific role, but to Klopp's credit, he does stick with what he's good at, and it's not like they're rolling over for anyone. They're losing close 1-0 to Brighton. Like, those are 2 bad losses, but they're not. The problem is their attack doesn't look good, and then they're losing by a goal. Against City, obviously City were just better at the moment. They have all the momentum defensively. I thought Liverpool tried taking risks in that game, but City are just so good defensively that it wasn't coming off, and a team that was in poor form in Liverpool on that side of the pitch in the final third. City just, they had them on that day, and they had some brilliant moves, City, to carve open those first few goals, and then Phil Foden, the moment of magic. But the problem with Liverpool is too many injuries at the back, so they look confused, and they don't have that continuity that they had from defense to midfield to attack, and it's kind of their whole structure has kind of gone out the window, so they're trying to scramble on coming up with a new solution. They play a lot of possession. We've seen when Thiago comes in, what he does, but they're not getting the goals. So that's where Liverpool's problems are. And now they have to seriously look at the top 4, because it feels like City has already won the title. They have to look at top 4 and say, we're not secure yet. We have to be teams that we should be, because they have a target on their back right now, and that's a dangerous game for Liverpool to be playing.
Yeah, just to finalize on that, but I think we should just address the fact that Thiago being in this team, and the fact that they're doing worse than they were last season with a player such as him really says something about the difference between the 2 seasons and the 2 squads in itself. Thiago's a brilliant player, but even as someone I loved him in Barcelona and of course in Bayern, but one thing I've noticed always in his career is that he was never, unfortunately, the main man of a midfield. He was always a very good supporter in a great in supporting role. He was always fantastic in that. And that doesn't mean his quality isn't there. It's always there. But I think for the first time in Liverpool, he really is on paper the best midfielder they have, which is which says something, because I think against City specifically, he got found out really easily. And when Thiago's out of the game, that midfield is very weak. There's not too much, as you said, from midfield to offense. There's a disconnect at the moment that's kind of reminding me how United used to be last season. And that's something I think Klopp really needs to look into coming for the second half of the season.
I think with the Premier League, and I think a lot of people may be struggling in the Premier League because teams that just sit back, and when you don't have, like, the Premier League sometimes defined by just like moments of brilliance, and Thiago is he's an all-around player that kind of, he does everything in the midfield when it comes to Pat. So what I think his role has been changed, because when you said Barca and he had Busquets back there, or when you look at Bayern Munich and he has a guy like Javi Martinez, or he has Xabi Alonso kind of sitting with him, it obviously makes his job easier. But I think the plan was at Liverpool is Jordan Henderson fills a CDM role, and then Thiago is more licensed. But Thiago, I don't think, has the same kind of license, and he doesn't have the same kind of midfield around him. So I think it's less on Thiago because Thiago's still a brilliant player. Losing Van Dijk has forced Henderson to go back. So I think if you have Van Dijk healthy and then you have Jordan Henderson in the midfield, Liverpool obviously doesn't lose to Burnley and Brighton. Those two results probably just don't happen. So Virgil van Dijk, I think we all knew the importance of Virgil van Dijk, but now it's showing because Liverpool look like they may not be in the Champions League, which is a lot of it's down to the attack not firing. Trent's getting found out. So there's a lot of things going wrong for Liverpool, but they do have the individual qualities to bring it back. But top four is a must because for all the top 14, for the current, there's 4 teams fighting for 3 spots. It's Chelsea, it's Liverpool, it's United, and it's Leicester. And right now, it's really could be anyone's game because with a dip of form like we saw from Chelsea earlier in the year, a guaranteed place can all of a sudden look like a foregone conclusion in a matter of a month.
It really is that type of season, though. It really is that type of season that any team, I think Bar City at this point, can really, if you're second place right now, you can, by the end of the season, you may be in 5th. It's one of those that's so tight at the top. I don't know where it's going to finish. And and Liverpool is in that race as much as United and Leicester and Chelsea are as well.
Yeah. Quick, let's talk about Manchester City champions.
Yeah, I don't want to say it, man. I don't want to say it, but honestly, I have to. They are just firing on all cylinders. Defensively, I can't believe I'm saying this. The one thing that I thought that they didn't have was this defensive combination right now that looks fantastic with Diaz and who was it?
Stones.
And Stones. Yes, they are phenomenal right now. And with De Bruyne, I don't even like De Bruyne is not even the focal point right now. Bernardo Silva, you got all these players, Rodri, that are just
Gundogan's
playing.
had a phenomenal month and a half. Yeah,
he's been incredible, and you have to give credit to Pep. I really did think that this is a season that maybe things can go a little bit sour for him. But you know what? City are playing some great football, and I can't see anyone competing them. And that's coming from a United fan who's in second place right now. I just don't see it.
Yeah, I think Pep's gotten some slander over the last little bit because a lot of people like to call him a checkbook manager. People kind of, they would say, what if he is, at a team like West Brom or what? Like the thing is, Pep Guardiola isn't at West Ham. He is a player that thrives off having the best players and making them play at their best. And he does spend a lot of money, but unlike some other clubs, he gets the best usually out of those players. I mean, they've had some misses. Benjamin Mendy hasn't worked out for them. I mean, there's really very few players that haven't, that have really flopped at Manchester City under Pep because most of the players end up flourishing. So I think Pep does deserve a lot of credit for that. He had a lot of quality before he came in. He had De Bruyne already. Sterling was there from the beginning. Company and Torre for a period were there in his first, 2 seasons. But I think the one thing you can never say about Pep is he doesn't get the best out of his players because clearly he does. Clearly he has respect from all the teams that he has been at, and he does spend a lot of money, but he does get, the best results for that money. So I think criticism on Pep is, I think, unwarranted and unjustified because he's broken so many records. He wins trophies. He's still trying to get that Champions League, but, only one team can win the Champions League, and Real Madrid won 3 of them, 3 in a row while Pep was at City. So the challenge, obviously, now for City and for Pep is to win the Champions League. That's what he came in to do. But the Premier League's done and dusted because City is just the most consistent team out of the rest, and it's not close to their consistency is just so much more, or they're consistent. They're just simply more consistent than every other team in the league, and that's what is going to make them champions. That's 3 of the top 6. Let's go on to a team that we like to we have a lot. Let's talk about my Chelsea, and they fired Frank Lampard in a big move, bringing in Thomas Tuchel. From an unbiased point of view, Darya, I'd say, where do you stand on the first few Thomas Tuchel games?
To be honest with you, I would be the first one to say I don't like him, but to be honest, I do like. I don't mind this Chelsea team right now. Obviously, there's a long road to go, and they are in a top 4 race. They are climbing up. I like what I'm seeing from even bringing people like Marcus Alonso, even Jorginho. I know you have a criticism with him, but I think he's been okay recently. To be honest, I think in general that it's good to see the Chelsea team playing a little bit better in terms of its football, and you can see getting a result against Tottenham meant a lot. It would be especially for someone like Tuchel. So it's good to see. In terms of if they're going to challenge for the top awards, definitely. I do think they're going to be in the race with obviously, as we said, Leicester, United, and Liverpool. So we have to see how it goes. But honestly, so far, it's a good start for him. It's now a matter of how he proceeds. I know, obviously, at the end of the month, there's quite a few games, especially when you guys play United. So that should be very interesting. But and of course, you guys got Atletico Madrid coming up soon in the Champions League, so that should be very interesting as well. But other than that, yeah, it's quite interesting to see, and I'm keeping an eye on to see where they go.
Yeah, regarding Frank Lampard, I think it was a point of now or never if Roman wanted to fire him. And I think a lot of people are criticizing Roman because, he does a lot. The people wanted Frank Lampard to get more time, but clearly I don't think he was ready for the job and the pressures that came with it. And the Premier League's tough, especially this season, and top four was sitting there. And I think if we would have kept him, we would have lost him. And that takes away the possibility of signing world-class players in the summer.
Yeah.
A lot of people, there's a lot of reports saying that Roman wants Haaland or Erling Haaland. So top four is really a priority. And I don't think it was achievable under Frank Lampard this year because the football wasn't good. Tactically, he just looked very naive. And I think the one thing that Tuchel has brought is kind of a tactical awareness. Bringing a guy like Jorginho who, fills a specific role in kind of, ball retention, keeping the ball, keeping possession, going from side to side. So I think we know what Thomas Tuchel's identity is. And I'd say he has had probably the best possible schedule to start his campaign. Beating Burnley is nice. Spurs being a poor Spurs, being a very beatable Spurs side because of how defensive they play, kind of just fit into Tuchel's system and, winning off a pen. It's whatever, a win's a win. And then, squeaking out a win against, not Wolves, who did they? Against Sheffield. So, narrowly beating Sheffield. It hasn't been perfect, but so far it's been effective in getting them back into the top four race. And now they're 1 point behind Liverpool, 4 behind Leicester, and 6 behind United. And that's very, it's very achievable. We've basically done that in 2 weeks. So now he has a full season to implement his play style, to kind of figure out what players he wants to take into next season, what players he wants to get rid of, because I think there is still a lot of deadwood at Chelsea. We saw Rudiger's own goal against Sheffield in one of the more embarrassing moments that a defender could possibly have. I think Chelsea need to be more adventurous. They need to take more chances, and I think Tuchel, he's very safe, but he has to get more risks in attack in order to consistently beat teams in this league. Because I was watching, especially Jorginho, because I have an agenda on Jorginho, and I was watching him with a microscope against Sheffield. Just about every single pass he made was to either Kovacic or one of his defenders, and that was my problem. They weren't pressing Sheffield. Sheffield's defensive line it's so easily. We've seen throughout the year how easy it is to penetrate them over the top, just playing through them, and it looked like they wanted to almost play through them. They wanted to be too safe. Sometimes against a team that isn't good, you have to play them more direct. You have the players to that. So I wasn't impressed by Jorginho. I was impressed by him against Spurs and against Burnley because I thought he was very instrumental in those wins. But against Sheffield, there were moments where Sheffield was running into the box and Jorginho just doesn't have the pace or the strength to beat him. So there are problems with Chelsea. I think a lot of the personnel isn't perfect. So I think watching any Chelsea manager, they often have a short window. So Thomas Tuchel really has to impress if he wants to have a prolonged stay at Stamford Bridge.
That being said, let's just clarify, though. I think you and I had this conversation off camera. Lampard, whatever you think about him, and I was his biggest critic. Regardless, his legacy at Chelsea does not change. They had to do this. They had to do this for a business, and that's what football is at the moment. And it's not. I think he knows that it wasn't something personal, but you have to understand that if you're not getting the results in this game, especially in the Premier League, you ain't going to stay that long. And Lampard, unfortunately, did not get that. But in terms, I'm not even a Chelsea fan, but I know the feeling when it comes to someone like such as Ole Gunnar Solskjaer. If that were to ever happen, I would be feeling the same thing. If he ever had to go, I would understand it's a business. It's not about I love him as a player. You love him as a player, but it's one of those things you just. It's unfortunate. It's how it works. That being said, we'll have to see how Tuchel does in these next few months. We have to see if he's actually going to be proven the manager that we think he can be when he did at Dortmund and PSG. That being said, they're good signs, so we have to see how it goes.
Yeah, and when we come back to this conversation, whenever in a month, 2 months, whenever we come back to the discussion, I mean, we're judging Thomas Tuchel, basically every game, because now his season's really. I think after Newcastle, now the fixtures are going to start rolling in, where there's a lot of doubt, whether or not they can win or not. It's been pretty straightforward for Chelsea because their opponents are either off form or just not very good. First four so now I think after Newcastle, the real tests are going to start to begin, and we know that he can beat small teams because of the way he plays, because he plays a very safe game with a lot of ball retention, and he has the players to get away with that. But the real test is going to come against big teams with big squads, and teams are going to put Chelsea on the back foot. And we really haven't seen Chelsea on the back foot in 4 games. So I think that's where credit is due for Tuchel. But then again, that's where the credit kind of stops, because we have to see a lot more of his performance in big games. Let's switch over to your team, Manchester United. And we were talking about a title charge when we last spoke, but I think with City kind of dominating in the Premier League, what do you make of United? Kind of where are you on? I think everything, because I think there's a lot of questions surrounding Ole, the squad, the defense, the mentality. So there's a lot of kind of questions going around Man United. So where would you start on Manchester United? What would you kind of highlight as an issue that needs to be rectified going into next year?
Well, for sure. Like, I remember when we did talk about it, I said back then I didn't think they were title challengers, and yes. I'm not surprised where they're at. I know the squad. I know how it's been working for us. It's United has to go through a long run, and if anything, I was going to say if they were in April and they're still in the title charge, then fair enough. But I wasn't convinced because I don't think we have the squad. And in terms of where the biggest issue is, there are like smaller ones. I do think I personally am still a believer that Ole can do it in the job. I think there are some things he needs to work on, like his tactical substitutions. Like there's some games where he doesn't make a substitution until like the 85th minute, which is mind-boggling why he does that. And then there's some substitutions in particular that can be sometimes like a little bit more arrogant, not arrogant, but just a little bit I want to say naive. Let's say naive for the sake of the players he brings on. It kind of the system itself is still being worked on, but I think the biggest problem and the biggest issue here is the defense. Maguire and Lindelof, and I love it. I want to say that the that's a title-winning defense. It ain't. It's simple as that. Is not a title-winning defense. I said you said it more on Maguire. To me, I'm personally more on the Lindelof boat, where I don't think either of which are good. I don't think either of them are good enough in that combo. Bailly is great, but he's injured. You have Luke Shaw and Bissaka, which are playing great. Luke Shaw specifically. To be honest, I don't really see too much negatives except for his positioning sometimes. Wan-Bissaka makes great tackles, but in terms of his what he can do, his positioning and offensively, it's a problem. Defensively, United have issues, and that needs to be figured out. And this is completely different to how it was 2 years ago when that was one of our best things, where the midfield was an issue. And it's United seem to always have a problem in one position, and they never seem to go out and actually truly go fix it. And I'm not surprised where we're at. Look, we have a big schedule coming up, especially with City and Chelsea back to back at the end of the month. So that's a big stretch on which we're gonna have games at. Those can define the season in a sense. That being said, I don't think it's gonna make a difference. I don't see us going to City in the way they're playing and winning that game. I don't know about Chelsea result. I'm not sure. We'll have to see how that goes because I believe that's on.
Yeah,
Sorry, that's the 20th. Yeah.
all depends on on the day, right? We always talk
Yeah.
about in soccer, anything can happen on the day, and
Exactly.
it's two teams that you don't know what they're going to bring, and you don't know what moments are going to define. Yeah, so Chelsea United is a very unpredictable fixture for sure.
Yeah, but at that being said, I want to say that no matter what happens this season, I know a lot of people, especially Real fans, will say that they should have been, if they're going to be title challenges and talking this much, they should put money where their mouth is and actually go on and win it. To me, the only thing that saddens me is the fact that I think Ole has made progress this season, and that's the first time I'm actually saying that properly, where I can personally, I think that he's made progress. Whether it's individual brilliance that's helping him is another debate you can have. But to me, I think there is progress in the team itself that they can keep going, that they can push on from here. I think there's signings away. And Ole in a way is still a young manager in his own sense. I still have full trust in him. But as we've seen with Lampard and we've seen with other coaches in the league, anything can happen. And just because you're playing well now does not mean you're going to be playing well next season or how it goes and any other season for that matter. So that being said, I'm excited to see where they go with this, but I don't expect anything this season.
Yeah, I'm going to try to articulate my thoughts on United because I do have a few. The standouts, Bruno. I mean, what a player, what a performer, and the talent and the skill he brings to the Premier League. We talk about United's attack being as good as Rashford, Cavani, Martial, not this season, but in previous seasons has shown brilliance. But Bruno brings them all together, and the amount of goals that you guys would lose without Bruno, if you put literally anyone else in that role, like we saw like Pereira and Lingard and Matt try to fill those roles and just not doing it very well. Like you guys don't score as much with Bruno, and you guys would definitely lose a lot of leadership. He needs to be the captain of that squad. Get it off Maguire. I don't care what it would mean. Ooh, he's an England captain. He's Manchester United captain. What would it do to his feelings? My feelings are he's not that good. And him and Lindelof give up about 6 big chances a game. And the reason that I feel like McTominay is as valuable as he is to this United squad and Fred at times, there are moments that Fred does struggle, whether it's his size, whether it's physicality. Like we know how, the Prem is a very physical game. Scott McTominay is a very good like Prem player, just the way he's built, the way he could kind of connect the midfield and defense, the way he could get the ball up to Bruno and Rashford. I have not always been the biggest fan of McTominay, but I think the role that he does have in Ollie's team is a very important one. So I think a lot of credit goes towards Scott McTominay for the role he's filled. Defensively, outside of Luke Shaw, all of them have their flaws. You can have, good characteristics about like Harry Maguire. His positioning is usually, good. He doesn't usually miss headers when crosses come in. When he's on his game, he's very kind of hard to beat aerially. The problem is he's too slow. When we saw Calvert-Lewin for the first goal, get right by him, simple through ball, Calvert-Lewin. De Gea makes a mistake, Decore, and all of a sudden they're in the game. James Rodriguez scores, minutes later, and then the final goal to tie the game. It's just poor defending. Harry Maguire plays everyone onside. No one clears the ball, falls to Calvert. So it's the same kind of story with Man United. And I think Ollie does need to go if you guys want to compete. I just think he doesn't. He definitely, I think the one thing I'll give him credit for is the players do play for him. There's no doubt in my mind that the players are playing for Ollie. Otherwise, they would have had him fired. If they really wanted him fired, they would have had him fired. So the problem for Ollie is I think he's too tactically naive. We talk about substitutions. He takes too long to make subs. That's all true. And I think there's just too many games where United look flat-footed, they look slow, and they don't look like they believe they are title contenders. And there definitely are some flaws in that team. But when you look at everyone being poor and City having a really poor start, now they're only getting into it with their streak. United should be better than they are. And I think with Ollie, they'll always kind of have that. They won't be able to fulfill their potential. They need a coach that will be a leader, that will kind of guide them on how to kind of behave and on how to have that right mentality going into games, whether it's a guy like Allegri, who I think would be a good fit for United. they definitely do. They need another center back, but they definitely, I think, need another coach that will bring in a different mentality and a different kind of overall view to this United side, because I think a lot of fans currently view United as, weak, timid, defensively very poor, and relying on a guy like Bruno, which I do believe a lot of that is true. So United have to figure out a new identity, and we've seen Ollie for a while now. It's not like he's been here for a while. So I think that he's almost reached his peak. We know what they can be at their best, but we've also seen them at their worst, and their worst is very ugly.
I have to be honest. In some respects, I do understand what you're saying, but I gotta disagree with you in terms of bringing in someone like Allegri, and in fact, getting rid of a coach such as him at this point in his career. To me, you can't sack a coach that is second place and is playing the football in a way that they are. I'm not saying they've been perfect. They've by no means been perfect, but to me, I think it's one of those things. As a coach, in the Premier League has never been a game where you allow coaches to stay more than they're allowed, I want to say, because we've seen it in the past. There's a lot of coaches that are not given that chance, and we were just talking about Lampard and stuff. They're given it a number of chances, and they aren't proven right for the team. But you see what they're doing with Arteta right now, and with Arsenal. And whether or not you and I may have our disagreements on that as well, but to me, I think that is a good mentality to have with a team, because you never know. United right now are better off they're better than last season, and that's a fact. Whether Bruno Fernandes is the reason for that is another thing, but I think Rashford is having his most prolific season since being at United. I think Greenwood is starting to get better. He had a poor run, but he's getting better. I think there are positives to this United squad, to me, that are starting to – they haven't yet. There's still issues, but they're starting to look to outweigh the negatives, in my opinion. That being said, I do understand what you mean. I think Ole has to figure out –
I think the only thing I meant is exactly its consistency. And at times they look very good. They look prolific. They're playing well defensively. But there's too many games, and the Premier League is very unforgiving, where they just don't look at it. Individual mistakes. The team isn't set up the way it should be. So I think there's just too much inconsistency, and Ollie's had he's had a while to figure that out. And I don't know if he will be able to win a Premier League just with his managerial abilities. I just think he's just too limited, and there's too many smart coaches in this league that have kind of exposed him in a way. It's not to say that he is the worst coach. I think it's not easy to be in United, and the players definitely do back him, because when he's up against the wall, when it looks like he's on his final straw, they win, they go on a run. I just think he is just very limited, and we've seen it throughout 3 years. It's not like 1 year we see something, and then the next year something completely different. It's been very consistent, and it's consistently just not good enough, and that's my issue with Ollie.
What I will say is this. You and I can always disagree on this one, but I do think we have to agree on one thing. If United were to find a way to win a trophy, I'm not saying Premier League, even the FA Cup, the Europa League, I think we may be having.
I think Ollie definitely gets another chance, but that will be determined. We'll see. Yes. Finally, before we go into a nice little VAR debate, let's go on to Arsenal. Let's quickly try to summarize what's going wrong with them. I think a lot of it is refereeing, but how do Arsenal kind of improve for next year? Because defensively they look good. It's a lot of times it's just from game to game. Something causes them to lose, whether it's a bad refereeing decision, whether it's just players making individual mistakes. So how do Arsenal kind of change their luck or their predicament that they're in, which is in the bottom half of the table?
Well, for one, I think Arteta has been kind of there's been issues in his tactical management, I would say, and in the way the brand of football that Arsenal are trying to play. And in my opinion, I think they should be doing it, but I think right now there's some adjustments that need to be made, and how even though it's a possession base, it doesn't feel as fluid. There isn't that fluidity with this team that he normally you would think he had, especially working under Pep. There's issues in quality in terms of the squad. I mean, I'm sorry, Xhaka, and I like Partey. I think he's great, but I don't think Xhaka is great, to be honest with you. I don't think there's a lot of players in that team that are very inconsistent, and you can't have a top four team that has inconsistent players. How they're deciding to play one game and then not in another. So, but we have to give credit on Saka. I think he's been definitely a highlight this season. But look, Arsenal are going to be Arsenal. They can't do surely as bad as it and they can do. They have to go in next season, because this season's done for them, in my opinion. I really don't think they're going to challenge.
And that's when they Europa League, yeah.
Unless
all their eggs are in that basket this year, yeah. And they have to win it because
that being said, you and I
don't.
That being said, you and I both know how challenging that Europa League,
especially this year. It's a deep pool this year, so we know it's not going to be easy no matter who they play in whatever round that they end up lasting. Yeah.
If they're going to keep Arteta, they got to start focusing already for next season. And it's
I think Arteta definitely deserves another year, because I think a lot of it isn't his fault. I think there's a lot of players that aren't good enough for that squad. And I think a lot of luck hasn't gone their way. So I think Arteta, he hasn't been perfect, but I think in his first year, he has time to learn and improve. And Arsenal they're in no position to get rid of him, because simply there's not an attractive job. So there's no one that they can really bring. And then there's no quick fix. They need a lot of new players. But I think a lot of the Arsenal players have clearly bought in. So I definitely think he deserves more time in that aspect. But clearly it's not working right now. But there are reasons for that. And I think we both know that a lot has kind of gone against Arsenal, which is funny, but it's not entirely fair to them. And speaking of unfair and unjust results, let's talk about VAR and the embarrassing state that the referees are in. Clearly, the problem isn't VAR, it's the referees. So what should the punishment be for these referees? Because it feels like every single game week, or it is every single game week, they get at least one decision that is just completely wrong and unjustified.
It's unfortunate, especially who was it for the Fulham game? I'm completely who was it for the Fulham game?
Which Fulham game?
The ref for the Fulham and West Ham game.
So Mike Dean.
Okay, sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know what? There's just a lot of issues in terms of referees. They have not been great throughout the years. I think both of us have agreed on that. I think VAR is just kind of showing the issues that they have as refs. I remember just Mike Dean the other day had an unfortunate, a terrible call that he made.
Souček elbowing Mitrovic.
He got a lot of abuse for that in terms of the call, which, by the way, I don't condemn any of that.
Yes.
Neither of us do. It's awful, the things I've been hearing. But in terms of his officiating, if we're just talking on that, I think there's just a general the VAR is causing
it's exposing
issues.
them. The problem is VAR, because when we're sitting at home and 95% of people that understand football can tell you that Souček, it's not a red card. He barely moved his elbow, and Mitrovic is rolling on the floor like he got shot. And then Mike Dean spends 3 minutes looking at the monitor, and he comes to the conclusion it has a red card. The problem is the calls that should be simple. They're getting completely wrong. And when you look at, even Timo Werner runs it's the most blatant penalty in the world against Sheffield United. Aaron Ramsdale comes out and it just has no business coming out there. Make contact with Timo Werner. Kevin Friend originally gets a call wrong, a blatant penalty where he's looking at it, and then he goes to the monitor and he takes 2 minutes to finally. So the calls just seem so easy and it's just so obvious, and they're not getting it right.
I also will say that, to add on to that, is that the rule book or the changes in the rules is not helping anything. The handball rule, the offside rule, everything is just causing such a mess with and miscommunication between VAR and the actual refs on the field. There's just too much of an inconsistency. And
all players and fans want consistency, and they're just so inconsistently bad. It's remarkable.
Yeah. Look, we're both hoping that VAR can improve. Obviously, the concept is great, and I think that there's some refs are great in this league, but honestly,
most of them are garbage.
They're not great. Yeah, I'm sorry, and they need to change. The FA has to do something about these type of the refereeing in this league.
Yeah, well, now everyone's calling them out, and then so we'll see we'll come back to this conversation in a few months to see if they have made those changes. And I think we're good for a soccer segment. I think that we've covered it all.
Okay, so now we are going to move on to our last segment of the not so rapid fire fun. Best part of the Super Bowl.
The weekend. They'll screw the Grammys from the weekend, thank God, proving that he could put on a show. I mean, it wasn't a close game, but the weekend, I thought it was a great watch. It was a great halftime show. Michael Jackson will never be kind of overthrown as the GOAT, but I thoroughly enjoyed the weekend's halftime performance.
Basically anything but the actual game itself. So you could say a halftime show. You could even say the commercials,
even, yeah.
just not the game.
Yeah, for me, the Super Bowl commercials. Yeah, the Super Bowl commercials were great. Yeah, the game not so much.
Yeah, screw you, Tom Brady. We don't care about your 7th ring.
Is the GOAT talk over for Patrick Mahomes?
No, because that game was on Patrick Mahomes. I mean, football is a team game, and we know that the quarterback's the most important position, but they didn't lose the game because of Patrick Mahomes. He was doing everything, a lot of drop passes. We talked earlier on the show about him having to basically run for his life every single snap. So, I mean, no, the GOAT talk's not over, and we'll see what Patrick Mahomes has in his future.
Yeah, not by a long shot, because Mahomes has nothing left to prove in his career. He's already been the MVP. He's already won Super Bowl MVP. Now the question is whether or not he'll be the GOAT is by whether or not he'll do this again. And he's only 25. I'm not betting against him being back here even next season.
He's a young QB. He's coming back next year, and I have a feeling he's going to come with fire. And I don't think this is by any means the end of him. He's going to keep going.
After Danny Amendola's comment about the Patriot way, have we overrated Bill Belichick and his system?
Yeah, so basically Danny Amendola just said it was more about the players and less about Bill Belichick, and that's a bunch of nonsense because Bill Belichick is he's a genius. He's a great head coach, and it doesn't make sense for a former player to disrespect. I mean, you could praise both, but to disrespect Bill Belichick is just nonsense because we know without Bill Belichick, Tom Brady isn't who he is as a player, as a person, and as a leader.
Yeah, give Belichick Antonio Brown, give him Mike Evans, give him Chris Godwin, give him Gronk back. They're going 16-0, simple as that. Belichick is the greatest coach to ever coach the game of football, and that has not changed.
I'm sorry, but I love Amendola, but I can't say that, man. This Belichick is a one of a kind coach. You can't go to this many Super Bowls and do what he did by saying that it's a system. And to me, I don't buy it at all.
Jordan or Brady, who is the ultimate GOAT?
I mean, it's hard because when you judge two sports as individuals, you look at basketball and it comes down to, the final shot. Football is a team game, and there's a lot of kind of variables you can never predict in football, and the NBA is a little more predictable. But when you look at Jordan's ability, his shot-making ability, the clutchness that he comes with, it's just so hard to dispute Michael Jordan as just the ultimate GOAT in sports. But the argument will be there for, many years to come.
I'm going with Jordan, and I this might be controversial, but I don't think it's even that close because when you look at Jordan's tenure with the Bulls, every time they won a championship, that it was because of him. With Brady, that's not really the case. You kind of see sometimes it comes down to the defense. It comes down to so many pieces, like you said. There's more collective things that happen as a team. But with the Bulls, it's always Jordan.
The bias side of me wants to say Brady, but unfortunately, I do have to agree. I do think Jordan is a one of a kind, and he will be forever a legend in basketball and in sports in general.
That was a very good transition, by the way, from football to basketball. Where is Carson Wentz best fit?
God, I mean, I don't think he has the best fit. I just don't think he's that good. I mean, we can all remember the great times that, Philadelphia and Carson Wentz had. But ultimately, in the playoffs, he's either not there, he doesn't show up. It's interesting. Maybe he goes to Indianapolis. Maybe he goes to Chicago. That's yet to be determined. But I don't see an elite quarterback anymore.
I think that the most reasonable fit will be the Colts, and I think Carson Wentz, he's not a really good quarterback, but I would say he's far from being the worst quarterback a team can have. And with the right system that Frank Reich would have for the Colts, I think he can be a serviceable QB. And if you look at a lot of it was on Doug Pearson, who was his coach for most of the time.
Personally, I think it's the Bears. It's all depending, to be honest, about what happened with Watson. But I don't, like Evan said, I don't really trust Carson Wentz anymore. He hasn't been performing as of recent years, so I don't know. But Bears would be the best pick for me.
I mean, we definitely seen talent in there, but we just don't know what you're getting anymore to Carson Wentz, and that's kind of a scary thing from your QB.
Yeah.
The Hornets have been the most exciting team. After LaMelo Ball, who has been the best player to watch?
I mean, it's between two. You can look at the connection that Bridges and Ball have kind of made that. They've made that connection, and it's really fun to watch those two because they kind of have that telepathic, communication on the court. But I'd say the way Gordon Hayward's kind of reinvented his career, it's a much better story. To average 23 is not easy. So the fact that Gordon Hayward's gotten his footing back in this league is a lot of fun to see.
Yeah, I was going to go with Gordon Hayward. I think this definitely the best we've seen of him since his Utah days. And he's kind of – LaMelo Ball is kind of like that – is kind of the rising star of that team. But, like, in terms of who's, like, kind of solid and you can kind of depend on as a veteran, it's clearly Gordon Hayward.
The NBA COVID cases are going up. What do you make of the Kevin Durant contact tracing?
I mean, most Raptors fans would have been watching that game and kind of not knowing what was going on throughout the game. The NBA has a problem. And it's the fact that it's either they're trying to be too safe or you don't know if they're being safe enough. And, I mean, they told Kevin Durant to sit and then let him play and then they told him to sit again. So, I mean, the NBA definitely has a problem. We've seen all the postponements, so they got to figure it out.
Time.
Yeah, that was just kind of a mess, the way they handled it. Like, it's kind of the story of the NBA and how they handle COVID. Like, they don't really know what they're doing at the moment. They're kind of lost on how to properly go forward with this. So I think that whole situation during kind of explained it all.
Yeah, protocol is protocol, but to be honest, I don't think they've been following that great. The whole thing was kind of a mess. Watching him come in the first, and then what was going on, it was just completely a mess in itself.
I must say, before we move on to the next question, it must be said, we don't know what's going on, within the NBA, and it definitely is very difficult because it's an unprecedented situation. But the fact is, Kevin Durant played in that game. If he had COVID, he was already going to transmit it to all the Raptors and the Brooklyn Nets players simply because if he had it, he was playing and he would have given it. So the fact that they let him play and then they told him to sit afterwards, that's kind of the big red flag for the NBA. So I just had to add that on because of how important that kind of that information is regarding COVID.
Will the NBA actually pull off an NBA All-Star game?
Oh, I hope not. I mean, what's the point? I mean, what's more important, playing an All-Star game or finishing the NBA season? Adam Silver, I hope he makes the right decision because it's a pretty easy decision to be made.
I mean, I feel like they will, but it's going to be a stupid decision for them too. But I feel like they still will. But they want to bring more TV viewership, especially without the limited fan attendance. So they're going to pull off something like this. But I think, again, it's a really bad idea to do this because of how bad things are right now.
I agree. Honestly, I don't think it's necessary to have this All-Star game. It's great to see the stars, but to be honest, the novelty of it has always worn off of having this big game. So to be honest, I think it's unnecessary in these times.
Not the year for it.
Yeah.
The Utah Jazz are sitting at the top of the West. Do they need another star to contend?
Yeah, this question came from an article I saw where could the Utah Jazz maybe pull off a Bradley Beal or a Zach LaVine? And we talked about Bradley Beal maybe going to Miami or Boston, a contender in the East. But Utah, I mean, when you look at the overall play of Donovan Mitchell, Mike Conley has been a phenomenal contributor. We know what Gobert brings on defense, and Jordan Clarkson off the bench has been phenomenal. If they add another starter there, they may be pushing the Lakers and the Clippers in the West. We just don't know.
Yeah, I agree with you. If they add a star, then they are definitely contenders, and they do have a good chance against a team like Lakers. But also, I'm not even counting them out completely yet because I think if Donovan Mitchell is kind of on that fringe as a superstar right now, he's not quite fully there yet, but he is close. And I think if you could take that step forward, they're contenders even just as now.
To me, I think Mitchell will be a superstar by the end of the season. Personally, I think that Utah Jazz team is very well balanced, and I think they're going to push ahead this year.
Okay, last question. What league has the worst refs?
The Premier League. It is a joke, and it's embarrassment, and it's pathetic. I never thought the NBA.
Tell us how you really feel.
I never thought the NBA refs would ever lose their crown as worst refs in professional sports. Premier League, round of applause. You guys suck.
Yeah, as someone who doesn't watch much soccer, I gotta leave the crown with the NBA, and it's just every game. It's kind of expected that bad calls will happen, and then you kind of just have to accept it as part of the game. But since we're accepting it, that kind of just shows how bad it's always been for the NBA.
To me, it's not even close. It's the Premier League, or soccer in general. I'm sorry. Right now in Premier League, it's awful with VAR. It's a joke. I don't know what's going on. It's just a complete and utter mess that's happening with the referees in there. They gotta fix it up.
I think that's about it for today. Thank you for listening to 5 Sports. As always, if you like what you are listening to, feel free to subscribe and join us next week, and we'll be back on Spirit Live within the next 2 weeks. Bye, guys.
Thank you guys.
Thank you for listening.